Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the product school this evening. We're going to be focusing on strategy and influence today. So I hope you're all in the right place, and thank you to Seattle Product School for inviting me to come speak today. So we'll get started right away. So who am I? As mentioned, I'm the Director of Product Management for Agencia's Global Data Platform. So my focus is all on data. So I'm very excited for the data and analytics piece here, so thank you for that. And my team is all about data. So you will see a little bit of a bias. You'll see some of these slides have data strategy on them because I've used them for data strategies before, but just forgive me. So I've been with Agencia for about 1.5 years, but I was with the company for about 5 years on Expedia side as well as Agencia before that. And my big hobbies, I have a blog because I'm a data geek, datagami.blog if anybody's interested. We talk about using data for good. I'm actually was thinking I might make a couple of articles out of this presentation, so we'll see. All right, so I wanted to start off with just talking a little bit about what a strategy is. We'll go into the components of a strategy, successful strategies, and then go into what is influence and some tips and tricks basically as far as influence itself. Now, I am not an expert on strategy and influence, so I'm going to be speaking about my background and my understanding and my experiences. Okay, so strategy. The big thing with strategies, you hear people talk about strategic versus tactical. We use those terms all the time. Tactical is talking about the here and now. What are we going to do today? Strategic is making sure that we're keeping our focus on the future. When you're building a strategy, you're really thinking about what are you going to do, how are you going to do it, and why are you going to do it? Where you see a lot of failures sometimes within strategy, and we'll get into that, is not focusing on those things and not thinking about where and why and how. All right? Also making sure that you're not trying to be all things for all people. It is really possible to try to, if you're not directed, if you don't have a strategy, you're just running the ship without any direction. So when I started at Agencia about 1.5 years ago on our data platform team, we were building things left and right. We were building awesome things. We had built a solution in Hadoop, which was great. It was a technological wonder. We had built things in Amazon Web Services, which were also technological wonders. But where were we going with those solutions? What did we want to get? What did we as a data platform team want to be when we grew up? And we didn't know. So we had a lot of disjointed technical solutions without a vision of where we wanted to go and how we were going to get there. Right? And I think that's very common within strategies or without strategies. Everybody's moving as fast as they can, but we don't know where we're going together as a team. So the strategy diamond is not mine. I didn't come up with this idea. There's several articles. I couldn't actually find where it originated, but the 5 main parts, elements of a data is going to be there, of a strategy. So the arenas, vehicles, differentiation, your staging, and your economic logic. Right? And we're going to walk through those 5 things. But before we do, a little story to just walk through. So you probably saw the first picture earlier on that was myself and my mother in the Jordan River with our feet in the Jordan River. So we're big travelers, and we went to the Middle East last November. And on the way in the Palestinian territories, we're on our way to Jericho, and we stopped at the sea level signs because Jericho was way below sea level. So we stopped there to go basically get our picture taken next to the sea level sign, right? And we weren't alone. There were a whole slew of buses that were stopped there to get their picture taken at the sea level sign, because after that, you go down, down, down on the road to get to Jericho. It's like the lowest city in the world and the oldest city in the world, I think, the two. So it's cool. Anyway, so as we stopped to get our picture taken by the sea level sign, we saw this gentleman riding by on his camel. And I didn't know it at the time, but he had just finished giving camel rides to the people who had stopped on their buses to take their picture with the sea level sign, right? And I don't know his name, so I'm calling him Madi because that was our tour guide and I know that name, right? So Madi finished giving camel rides for the day. He's set up right there at the stop where all the buses stop to have their picture taken. He's got his camel rides he's offering. He's done for the day, and he's jumped on his camel to ride home. So all of us tourists getting off the bus, we're fascinated. Now we're bored with the sea level sign, and we're really fascinated with Mahdi on his camel. He's a Bedouin, he's got the scarf on his head, and we thought that he was going to the Bedouin village down the street, and we thought he was going to ride his camel, and we were just fascinated. So we watch him, and he goes over to dismounts from his camel, which is all, we're surprised, what's he doing? And he goes over to a tarp, and we thought that was his tent, and we're confused because the tent's out in the middle of nowhere, and why doesn't he live in a Bedouin village with the rest? Because we passed Bedouin villages everywhere. Anyway, turns out that was his pickup truck. And he hooks his camel up to the back of the pickup truck and drives off down the street to his real village that he really lives in, probably a house with his pickup truck. Right? And I wish I could play the video because the video is great. It's the camel riding behind the truck, but I was worried that might not work so well. But what fascinated me as I was thinking about preparing for today is he's a great product manager. Right? He's really thought this through. He knows his audience. He knows what he's doing. He's thought about his product, and he's thought through the 5 elements. Plus, it's a camel behind a pickup truck, so it's kind of cool. So if you think about Mahdi for the arena is where are you going to be active? So where are you planning on on putting out your product, right? So what would Mahdi's arena be? Any thoughts? Tourist. I'm sorry? Tourist. His market is tourists, right? But where is he? Right, his market segment. Yep, gotcha. His geography, obviously the sea level sign and the road to Jericho, right? He's got a pretty finite audience there. His channel. So where is he operating? Right. Stages. His technology is okay. His technology is a camel. It's not that great, but. Vehicles, how are you going to get there? Right? So this is your means, and a little tribute to Burt Reynolds and the Trans Am today, so there we go. How are you going to go about doing this, right? Are you going to purchase another company? Are you going to acquire? In Mahdi's case, no. In Mahdi's case, he's developing the product himself, right? He's got the camel, maybe he purchased the camel, but he's building up the product himself. You've got acquisition, you've got alliance. There's different ways that you can go about getting to your strategy, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit. This is very, very high level. Most of us as product managers we don't get the opportunity to do strategies at that big of a level, right? Most of ours are going to be much smaller products, at least to start. And I'll talk about that because mine's the same. Right? But this is the big picture. This is big strategy. Differentiators. How are you going to win in the marketplace? What's going to set your product apart from the competition? Okay. If you think about this as your image, your customization, this is what do people think of when they think of you? Are you going to try to compete on price? Are you going to try to compete on image? How are you going to compete? Okay. So one big one that comes to mind right now, of course, in this area is Nike. So the Just Do It campaigns that just came out. Nike made a huge concerted effort and a gamble when they put out the Just Do It commercials with Colin Kaepernick, is that how you pronounce it? So they're basically gambling that their audience and their targeted audience is worth going after, and that the boycotting and that the flack that they get is going to be worth it. So it was very much focusing on image. Their normal audiences, their normal purchasers are younger. So 20, 30-year-old younger people, urban livers live more often than rural, and people that really want their products to stand for something. And so Nike made this calculated effort. They said, we're going to try this, and so far it's working for them. Right? Any other products come to mind when you think about differentiators? Nothing. Apple? I wouldn't give up my Apple for anything in the world, right? But it makes no sense because I don't like Macintosh computers, so I don't understand it. But Subaru, and what is theirs?
They're sell to the Pacific Northwest, very focused on mountain-going folks wanting natural road driving.
Very target audience. Yep. Yep.
Southwest Airlines.
And theirs is.
Anyone can board at any time and take any seat. There's no first class. It's for the budget-minded traveler.
Right. Right. People that are cost conscious, that don't care about the frills. I went on a trip using Norwegian Airlines just a few weeks ago, and it was fantastic. It's very low cost. You have to order your food beforehand if you want it, but they had this great little menu on the plane where you could just order your food, and the flight attendant would bring it to you at your seat as soon as you ordered it. You had to pay for it, but the service was great. And I was like, anyway, it's great little aside. Sorry. Any others that come to mind as far as? Yep.
Dollar Shave Club.
Dollar Shave Club?
Yeah.
Ah, I'm not sure. And what is their specialty?
They make razors.
Okay, that are targeting that more economic.
Yeah. Targeting that and shave.
Gotcha. Okay, there we go. Staging. How are you going to move? So you can build up the greatest strategy in the world, but if you don't know how you're going to get there, it doesn't do you any good. Right? So great ambitions, but you have to figure out how do you stage it, how do you sequence it to be able to get from where you are to where you want to be, and how fast are you going to move? If you're trying to take advantage, Nike, for example, they needed to move pretty quickly with this advertisement because the window of opportunity is finite, right? So they want to capitalize on all the publicity around the NFL protests, then they're going to have to move fast. Now, and the sequencing, especially in my world, because my world is all about data access. And so I have to have somebody put the data into a system before I can get the data from them, before I can make it available to reporting. That sequencing piece, if I say that I'm going to build the greatest data warehouse in the world, but my data's not ready, there's nothing I can do. Economic logic. How are you going to make money? Or in some cases, how are you going to not cost money or reduce costs, right? So I was a consultant at the Gates Foundation for a few years, and it was an amazing thing, but it completely changes your thought process. They're not making money, they're giving money away. My job was to make sure that we gave enough money away on a yearly basis, right? So they're not focusing on increasing on revenue, they're focusing on results. So it's a very different direction and a very different strategy, right? Awesome place to be. But, so new sales, are you going to try to get more sales? Are you going to increase the sales you already have? Are you going to charge more for the products that you already have? Or are you going to decrease costs? Any one of these, great. And there might be more. I don't know, I couldn't think of any more on here, but. So good strategy, it's practical. It has to be easy to follow when you're doing day-to-day activities. If your team can't get behind it, you're not going to be successful, right? I have a vision, and we'll talk about the vision for my team in a minute, but the vision is just where do we want to go. If the team doesn't know how to get there, and they don't understand how, if they can't get bought on enough to put it into their day-to-day practice, we're not going to be able to get there together. Okay? It has to be relevant. It kind of goes without saying, but we'll get into a little bit too later on. A topic, I'll get there later. But it has to be contextual to the organization. It has to be specific to what I'm trying to do. Evolutionary, no strategy stays the same. We'll talk again about a couple of products that have changed their strategy over time, but a strategy is based on what you know today. The odds are that what you know today is going to change tomorrow. I get a lot of people, especially early on in their careers, where they don't want to put a strategy on paper because they're so worried about what might change, right? I can't commit to this because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's okay, right? You can put assumptions within your strategy that I assumed this and I assumed this and I assumed that. Or you just realize that everybody reading it knows that it's going to change, right? So it's based on the information that I have today and what I think. Connected and integrated with everything that comes before it or after it. Also, because I'm in data and I have upstream teams, I need to make sure that my strategies are linked to theirs. If I have a strategy that requires data from another team, I'm not going to be successful if that other team doesn't also have a strategy to create that data. Right? So you have to be working together, and this is where the product management influence and communication comes in, right? Being able to work with the other teams to make sure that they're getting you what you need and that you're getting them what they need. Right? Especially when it comes to go-to-market, because you're going to be working with marketing managers, with salespeople. There's a lot of people involved, potentially. Depends on the size of your product. So I'm taking a leadership class right now, and some of the feedback that I got was that they would do this self-survey thing where you basically judge yourself. And it came back and it says that I'm really pessimistic. And I thought, okay. And then I realized that the slide is about how strategies fail, not about how they succeed. So I'm like, oh, I'm totally pessimistic. So, and it's funny because I debated focusing on success or focusing on failure, and I chose failure. So apparently the survey was right. So we're going to talk a little bit, or I'm going to talk a little bit about why strategies sometimes fail, right? So strategy is about execution. This is a quote from Colin Powell. All the great ideas and visions in the world are worthless if they can't be implemented rapidly and efficiently. And so we talked a bit about that already, but this is really all about making sure that what you're doing can be executed on. A dream is not enough. So one of the biggest challenges is that one size doesn't fit all. If you go to product management school, if you read a product management book, and I'm one of those people that's never gone through formal product management training, sorry. We focus a lot on the typical product, and most of the examples that I'm going to have today are the typical product. So those are going to be products that you think about that you can purchase in the store because they're easier examples for everybody to understand. But that's not necessarily the typical product. Right? Some products are behind the scenes. Some products have no front end. Some products, especially now with product managers being it's such a bigger role now, especially in Seattle, than it used to be. If you go back, when I was at Expedia back in 2010, I left in 2010 and then came back about a year and a half ago. And when I left, we had about 5 product managers within Agencia, just really small product management team. And I come back 7 years later, and now we have about 50. Right? So, and that's just within Agencia, which is just one of the brands. And if you count our user interface people, our design people, our product support teams, it gets up to more like 80 people. So it's a big product team. Product is really exploding and it's changing a lot. Whereas at Expedia and Microsoft used to have this thing called a program manager, and I used to be one. And it's great, but Agencia got rid of it and replaced it with a tech team and a product manager. So part of that is the move to Agile. We're embracing the Agile approach with a product manager and Agile teams. But part of that is also just trying to make sure that the program manager's job before was very technical, and they wanted somebody that was really focused on the product. It doesn't mean that you're not technical, but it's kind of going with the industry direction of more product management. It causes some challenges today, especially in my world, because in the data space, some of the skills that a program manager used to have, we didn't replace with product management. So I'm told sometimes that I'm not supposed to write SQL queries to go do analysis on the data, but I'm a product manager of a data platform. So who's going to do it if not me, right? So there's some things we have to work out. But anyway, so one size doesn't fit all. Your products are all going to be different. Some of them will have front end, some of them won't. Some of them will be really tiny and behind the scenes. Some of them will be blaring with press releases. It just depends. So the one on the left here, the picture here on the left, is Agencia's Analytics Studio. So we just launched this with a big press release a few weeks ago. The Global Business Travel Association, it was our front and center. If you Google Agencia Product Analytics Studio, it'll come up. It's a cool thing, right? This is not my product. It's awesome, but it's not my product. This is my peer. I work with him. He's one of my stakeholders. It has a user interface. It has thousands of customers. He can go out and talk to his customers and say, what do you want me to build? And he can interact with his customers. And he has a user interface person who does the user interface design. He's a much more traditional product as far as how we think of products. You can't pick it up off the shelf, but it's got the components of what we think about for product. On the right, this is not my actual data warehouse, but this is a generic picture off the web of a data warehouse. This is my product. So my product has no user interface. My product, the end result is a bunch of tables on a data platform. It's awesome, but it's a bunch of tables on a data platform. So I don't get to go out and canvas my customers. My customers are the people who built this, right? So my customers are a very small set of stakeholders. I have internal analytics teams. I have external reporting teams. Those are my stakeholders. So it's a different type of product. There is no user interface. Nobody cares from my product what the competition's doing. Did the competition build a data lake or a data warehouse? Nobody cares, right? Now, for Stephen, we care what the competition did. He needed to go out and do analysis. He has to see what they're offering the competition. Very different world there, right? Doesn't make mine easier or harder, it just makes it different. So my arena, my vehicles, those kinds of things. It's also difficult when you're having internal conversations because my product management team doesn't fit the definition of a traditional product management team. Our skill sets are very different. I borrowed this from the Harvard Business Review, had an article. I was researching data strategies a few weeks ago, and I really liked the way that they did this. So when you think about another reason that strategies fail is that we forget about offense versus defense. And the way that they bucketed offense is really the things that we have to support. Or sorry, defense, the things that we have to support. So the things like compliance, like security, the things that have to happen to our company in order to keep the lights on and the doors open. Then there's offense, which is your competitive analysis, your competitive position, and this is more going out and trying to compete in the world, right? So some teams and some companies need more defense than others. So the examples that they put are hospitals. They're highly, highly regulated. They have to be really focused on defense. So you get into banking, you also have very highly regulated. They have to also focus on defense. Product management for those types of companies is going to be different than product management for a retail company like Expedia, where we can really focus on offense, except for my product, right? Because I have thousands of users of my product. So it has to be supported. It has to not break. It has to be available every day. It has to, when something's wrong, I have to go fix it. If you look at where I spend my time, when I was hired, it was to transform our data warehousing, our BI transformation. But it turns out that about 80% of our resources are needed just for keeping the lights on and the doors open. So I can focus all my time and energy on a future strategy, but I won't be able to execute it because I don't have the people and the bandwidth. Okay, so I loved this. I think it's a really good way of just reminding people that some products, and the more products you build, the more you have to support, right? So then you get into more defense because you've got more out there. We started internal analytics at Agencia. We really started picking up a lot of internal analytics for our CEO. And the first one was great. The entire team was focused on building new technology and building new dashboards. The second one, now we've got to support the first dashboard and build the second one, right? The third one, now we've got to support the first two dashboards and build the third one. Over time, your resources start being spent more on support than on new development. Just is what it is. There's also some examples where the product itself was flawed. So greatest strategy in the world, if your product's not any good. Samsung Galaxy Note 7. My boyfriend said I have to say Galaxy Note 7 because the other Galaxies are good. He's not an iPhone user, sorry. So we know the product had issues, right? It caught fire, burned up, not a good thing. Orbits, I'd never heard of it, but apparently the soda, the can looked like a lava lamp. So it was really cool. But the soda tasted like cough syrup. Yeah. The chips, I'm not totally sure if this is the right picture, but Frito-Lay had put out a brand called Wow that had something called Olestra in there. And Olestra bound with the fat in the chips and processed through your body, so you didn't gain weight. Awesome. Except that in binding with the fat, in going through, it caused side effects like diarrhea and other things. So in order, you got the great taste, but maybe not the great side effects.
Weight loss.
And weight loss, yes. You could eat as many as you wanted, but maybe not in public. So, yes. And you remember, I mean, for months, it was a really popular thing. A lot of the chip companies were adding it in. I think Pringles had actually come out with Olestra brand or Olestra added, but short-lived.
Yeah.
Right? I was trying to think of any others that are just really seriously flawed. We had some car recalls recently where the cars had issues. Any others that come to mind?
Similar in CPG to New Coke.
No, I'm sorry?
New Coke.
Ah, yes, and I have that as an example later on too. But yes, exactly, New Coke. And I don't totally remember what was wrong with New Coke. I just know that it never caught on and it was a flop. But it would,
Like, no one asked for it. It was pushed on.
ah, right. So we didn't know our marketplace, right? So we said, hey, if we build it, they will come, and we built it, and they didn't come. So yeah. Almost. There we go, New Coke. All right. So they didn't understand the marketplace, right? So if you don't understand your customers, Coke built New Coke. The customers didn't care, didn't want it, said, why are you changing this thing that I love? Stop. Blockbuster, they get picked on so much. It's so sad, but they are a good example of a company that didn't respond to the changes in their marketplace, right? Does anybody know Clippy?
Oh my god, I remember.
Yeah, you have to be an older group to know Clippy, I think. I'm sorry?
I totally forgot about it.
Yeah. So Microsoft Office at one point in time had introduced Clippy, kind of an animated paperclip to help you find your things and help you learn the Microsoft Office tools. The problem was that he took resources out of your computer, so your Microsoft Office now ran slower, and he was annoying. He was there every time you logged in, and he wouldn't go away. And the first time that you didn't know how to use the tool, maybe that was helpful, but the second or third time, Clippy was just a pain. So eventually phased out, and Clippy's gone. The Zune, anybody know Zune? Yeah? Where was the yeah? I heard a yeah. Oh, there we go. So, I'm sorry? I know, and that's why it's on here, yeah. I was asking, in that leadership training class, I was asking the people at the table for examples of products that failed in the marketplace, and this was one that came up, and I'm like, perfect, I've never heard of it, it couldn't have done well. And it's interesting, we were trying to find newer examples and couldn't come up with any that were really newer in the last few years. I struggle with this one a lot, and I think a lot of product managers do, that your product gets started, you've got a most amazing strategy, and then Europe implements the Global Data Protection Regulations ruling, right? So Global Data Protections Regulation came out in Europe. The deadline was earlier this year, and now all of your processes, you have to have data deleted, you have to have super privacy enabled on your systems. And we had a deadline, and any company that did business with customers in Europe had to meet this deadline. So one of my teams was supposed to be focusing on this strategy. Now that team is GDPR. So nothing you could do, it had to be done. The same for Payment Services Directive, another EU strategy or EU ruling that's come out to manage how you capture payments from your customers. Changing our strategy, changing our direction. We need to make sure that we're compliant with the rules, and that's deviating from what we plan to be doing, right? Harley-Davidson, the new tariffs that have been implemented, they've said, hey, because of these new tariffs, we cannot do business. We have to change the way we're managing our business. So their strategy was the new rules come out. Strategy A, the cost that they planned out for strategy A isn't effective anymore. They've got to change, right? So some of these things, it wasn't that their strategy was flawed, it's just that things changed. So. Change is hard, and strategies require change, which is the reason they had our leadership class going yesterday through the change management whole process, is because there's entire people whose jobs are just to manage change. Change is not easy. And not all strategies require change, but most of them do. So. The salad example, McDonald's had gotten a lot of flack years ago for not being very healthy, right? So their menus, hamburgers, French fries. So they said, okay, no worries, we will introduce salads, and they did. They had so their strategy was all focused on changing their image to their customers, and then they had about 2% revenue from their salads. Awesome. No, not awesome, right? 2% is not very much. But their strategy was just to change their image. Their strategy wasn't to make money. But then they saw the 2% revenue, said, wait, we can do better than that. And they changed their salads. So added more dressings, added fried chicken. Awesome things, right? No longer about healthiness, and now more about trying to increase their revenue. So a change in strategy, definitely, but forgetting what they were doing in there in the first place and why they were going down that route. Who's actually had a McDonald's salad? Yeah, a few. Okay, more than 2%, I think. That's so, the beer example, the beer industry, right, was light beer was not a big thing for a long time, and it took a long time for the beer industry to get their customers to change and embrace light beer. Now it's everywhere, but there was a time when it wasn't. Loss of interest over time, poor Google Glass, right? My manager, the CEO at our consulting company that I used to work for, had bought Google Glass when it first came out, and he brought it to a company party, and it was awesome, right? You put it on, it was a fascinating technological toy, but you felt like a complete dork when you're looking straight at somebody, but you're not actually looking at them, you're looking at the glasses in their direction. So they think you're ready to have a conversation, but you're actually staring in the glasses. And there was no use case for it, right? People couldn't figure out what to do with it. It was really interesting. It was a really great technological advancement, but we couldn't figure out what to do with it, especially when stores and places started banning them. Well, okay. So people lost interest because they couldn't figure out how to use it in other than a gimmick. But it made for a really great Christmas party. Another challenge, the not being agile. So using this big bang approach where you're going to design your strategy and then you're going to implement it, and 2 years later you're going to have a result. It's very common in data warehousing, or in my field, because historically we built data warehouses in big bang approaches. Now we've embraced more of an agile technology and we build them in iterations. But it's some products you need to do big bang because you need to come out with a boom and a big press release and hide it from the public, right? But not most of them. Most of them, you're building them over time. We talked a bit about not being aligned with other teams. Didn't focus on the business value, a big, huge one. If you don't know why you're doing it, stop. Right? If the customer doesn't want it, stop. Also a big problem, the second one is one of my favorite terms. I stole it from a conference a few years ago. There used to be a conference called No Fluff, Just Stuff in Bellevue. Yeah, I haven't seen it in years, but it was awesome. So RDD stands for Resume Driven Design. So I want it on my resume, therefore the design is awesome. Right? You see it with big data, you see it with data science, you see it with all these things that your team wants it because it'll help them get their next job, but it doesn't actually add any value to the work that you're doing today. So Hadoop, I think, was an example there for our team. Hadoop was a technology that the team wanted to learn, they wanted to explore, they needed something to build, so we built something. Now we have one system that is done on Hadoop. It's not that Hadoop is a bad tool, it's great, but we have one piece of our process that's on Hadoop, everything else is on different technologies. How do you support that over time? Now, the rest of the team doesn't know Hadoop, so we have this one little piece that somebody said, hey, let's do, but there was no strategy on how to get there. So there's probably other examples of resume-driven design outside of the data space, but I think it's pretty common. Okay. Any other thoughts as far as strategies and why strategies fail before I go on? Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of a channel fit. So going back to the Hadoop example, VHS versus Betamax. Yeah.
Good call, yes.
Despite the technology, it didn't reach the appropriate audience because of improper channel selection or just conflict in the channel itself.
Right.
And hence the product itself failed.
Couldn't get there in the end. Yeah, that's a good one. Any other one? Nope, got them all?
It's a follow-up question. So if you have a one technology Hadoop example, so in retrospect, that wasn't the best thing to do, and now you have all this other, like, what do you do at that point? like now that piece of technology is integrated with your processes or whatever. So do you phase out? What do you do?
Yep, and it's a great question, and that really is the product manager's job now. That's my job to try to figure out how do we balance, we have this Hadoop process, I know that it's a risk, versus the new things that we want to build on the platform. And so to date, we've left it there because it doesn't hurt as much as the cool new things that we could build are awesome, right? But at some point, soon, probably in the next 6 months, the support on that's going to get harder, and we're going to have to prioritize decommissioning it over the new development. Also, I'm getting more resources and the team's freeing up a little bit, so it's easier for me to prioritize the more optional work than the required. GDPR was a big time sink for us. So we spent one of my teams pretty much entirely for several months just doing GDPR, which meant that things like Hadoop had to go by the wayside. So, but it's and that really is the hardest part of the product manager's job, is you've got these little decisions that have to be made on a regular basis, and some of them bigger. That one's pretty small in the grand scheme of things, but where you're weighing the things that you could do to make things more efficient and better and less risky with the new developments that will enable those dashboards to look cooler. Another piece that's for me, which is fun, is that dashboard that I showed you is fantastic, but we just did a press release on it and launched it to the world. Now, if they go in and they look, and in their dashboard, it has beautiful data, terrible data, right? Beautiful data. That's now my priority one, because now we just launched this out to the world, and that data needs to be good. So it also changed, and that's that coordinating with other teams. I didn't have anything to do with the launching of that to the world, but I support it, right? So we have to make sure that we're in sync and that we're coordinating together. So our data is amazing and awesome, by the way, so yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So what if like there is a new technology which is really good and it could like support, like it could go a long way, but the team is actually not educated in that technology. What do you do with that? It's like it would definitely take time and effort. It would have a great cost in ramping up everything, and we don't know, like down the road you can't really predict.
Right. No, and it's a great question, and we get it all the time now, right? I mean, the whole move to cloud. Well, it's great, but is it worth the work that we're going to have to do? Pretty much all the new technologies, you go through that. And for me, I'd say it's that close relationship with your tech team, right? So for us, we have a really close partnership between because I'm in the technical space, not all product managers will have tech teams, but we do. So you have a tech team that you work really, really closely with, and having that discussion with them, do you really need this technology? If so, what are the benefits? And now working together to make sure that you have a business case for it and that it's not just a tool that would be interesting. So it's also on tech to help make that argument. If they want the new tool and there is a really good business case for it, then we should be able to articulate that. And if we can't, it's probably not the right thing to do.
So I have one more question. Sorry. So there are then disruptive technologies which you can't really predict or analyze, and they actually change the market. And there is not a strategy because it cannot be analyzed. Right? Down the road, we see like great companies fail because of those disruptive technologies because they didn't get this. It's like always the case. So when you can't analyze, there can't be strategy. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, and I don't have a good answer there, to be honest. I think it depends on the situation, the scenario, and also depends on your product. Right? So some products are much more open to disruptive technologies than others, and some companies need or are more able to take gambles than others. So my company, for example, we take gambles in some products, or we might set aside some part of our resources for more risky products, but then we've got the bulk of them still working on our bread and butter. But other companies, especially startups, that's where they're going to go. So it probably depends. It's a little bit of an it depends answer, but I used to be a consultant, so that's what we do. But it does depend on the company, I would say. So, yeah.
Slightly tangential question here. When it comes to an internal product, customer enablement type product, how do you make the case using numbers in terms of maybe price and cost and the potential benefits coming out of that?
Yeah, I love all my answers are going to start with it depends, right? Because it does, and you should be able to come up with some kind of number. And if you can't come up with a number, and my product, for example, is really hard. It's almost impossible for me to come up with numbers because I enable other people to do things. I don't actually have any numbers myself. Nobody goes to our data platform and queries it and gives me money. It just doesn't happen, right? So I have to somehow basically tie myself in with the products that have dollars behind them. So when it comes to justifying my existence, I have to partner with the people that are generating the reporting or the analytics, and my justification is really tied with them. So you can't put a dollar amount. Mine are much more intangible justifications for my existence. So better data quality, which leads to better ability to drive the company. It's difficult. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. Oh, sorry, we got one back here.
A follow-up question on that. So you talked a bit about basically data as your product, and so it's accessed in different ways, whether with the reports in the GUI, or I'm guessing people download reports as well as the API. Do you have like specific metrics around that in terms of number of API requests, number of users who did that, and also the data veracity? If things change over time, obviously that'll be a big metric for you. So do you have a set of metrics like that you track?
We do, but the differences too. So yes, we do absolutely, especially for the tool that I showed you that's external. So there are all kinds of metrics on that. How many customers are using it? What are they using it for? What dashboards are they looking at? What filters are they filtering? We've got metrics all over that thing because it goes out to the world, right? And but internally, so if an analyst runs a SQL query on the data platform, I'm not tracking that as much. And it's just because it's not priority. It's not because it's not interesting, but you've got to measure what do you care about. And we know that we have a finite set of analysts that are internal that are running queries. At some point when I grow up, I'd love to be able to help them and do more there, but it's balancing the work that we do there versus where do you put those metrics? Because metrics cost money, right? Just putting in that reporting and gathering that data has to be prioritized in your backlog. So yes and no. Go ahead.
What kind of strategies do you use to get buy-in from your teammates for a specific priority?
Yes, that's a very good question, and it kind of goes into with influence. So how about we park that for just a bit, and we'll talk about influence and come see if we answered it? Okay. Was there a question? Yeah.
Okay. Even mine could be considered as influence.
Okay.
I'm still asking you.
Okay. No worries.
So if you, as a product manager, define a strategy, and then after that, you want to make sure that the engineering team and all gets buy-in for it. I mean, I've experienced scenarios where like engineering team is not on board with the same strategy, or they have their own thought process.
Right.
How do you go about aligning?
Yeah. And that's a really difficult one. So that alignment, if you have a tech team in your product, that alignment it can be difficult. It depends on, bless you, a lot of different things, right? So first, the relationship between product and tech. Also your organizational structure. So within our organization, product is completely separate from a reporting structure from tech. So my tech team, we don't have the only person that we report to in common is the CEO. So that changes the dynamics quite a bit, where product is responsible for the what and tech is responsible for the how. And other organizations, though, Expedia just went through a big change, and they've integrated their product and tech teams together. So product and tech report up now through the same teams. So it changes the dynamic again, because now there is somebody at the top who can call when there's a tie, who can help call the shots. And so it really does depend to me on how your team is structured and who's the tiebreaker when people disagree. For us, I have to work with my engineering team. In the end, if I'm product, I get to decide what we build, right? But they decide how we build it, and it's always a conversation. So especially on the data platform side, my product is a technical thing. So how do you separate the what and the how when it's an entirely technical product? And that's something I struggle with. So not an easy one. But that partnership between you and your tech team and convincing them, they also have to have faith that you know what you're doing. If they don't, and I have tech teams that have a little bit of a interest in product, and they think they know what's best for the customer, and you want to listen to them, right? Because they've got good ideas. They often could be a better product manager than me, but that's my title, so I get to prioritize. Was there a question back? No. Okay, but yeah, it's a challenge. Okay. Let's go into influence a little bit. How are we doing on time? We're okay, yeah. The power or capacity of causing an effect in indirect or intangible ways. So it's kind of, I joke that it's getting people to do what you want without telling them to do it, but it's not really what it is, right? You as a product manager, a lot of times, again, also depends on org structure and team, have the ability to influence, but you don't have the ability to tell people what to do, right? And this is a big piece of our jobs, is getting buy-in from our tech team, convincing them that you actually do know what you're doing and that this is the direction to go, but making them believe it, not just making them do it, right? So, how many people have read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People? There we go. We got a few hands. Okay. So I read this for the first time probably 10, 15 years ago. And I thought it was a book about manipulation. The whole thing felt like you were trying to get people to do what you wanted without actually telling them to do it. It felt almost subversive, right? But then I read it again probably 6 months ago when I started this leadership class. And I'm like, no, actually, it's kind of cool. So I think you have to struggle with some of the things he talks about before it really speaks to you. It's still a little bit about manipulation, so it is what it is. But he has some situations, and one of the big things that Carnegie calls out is just being able to speak to people and care about what they want, which is something I struggle with sometimes when we get busy, right? I just want to go into a room and make a plan and come out and everybody does it. I don't want to go into a room and try to think about what are the people thinking in the room and what are they doing and how are they doing this week. And so, but it is putting yourself in their place, especially when they disagree with you on product, right? If they disagree, there's probably a reason and you probably need to get to the bottom of it. So anyway, it's worth a read. Just to realize that some of the chapters are going to feel like you're manipulating people. So I love this. What do people expect from their leaders? As product managers, we're all leaders in one way or another, right? So whether you're actually leading the team from an HR perspective or whether you're just leading your product, you're leading people, and that's where the influence piece comes into play. So what the number one thing that people want from their leaders is for their leaders to know where they're going. Right? And that's where that strategy piece plays in so big, because if you don't have a strategy and you don't know where you're going, your influence is going to be greatly diminished and people aren't going to want to follow you. So communication, another thing that people want from their leaders. Competence, authenticity, they want you to be real. We had a whole lot in the leadership course that I'm going through, a lot of conversation around authenticity. Be your authentic self, show your authentic side, have authentic conversations. But it's true. We should be able to call out the elephant in the room when we're in a meeting, right? If I see somebody having an issue and I just keep going with the conversation as usual, I didn't solve that problem, right? I didn't, and sometimes it's not even a problem, but I didn't head it off. So we have one of the guys at Agencia who's been there for a long, long time, built one of our first data systems. And he has a tendency to roll his eyes when he disagrees with you, right? Or when he's concerned or what have you. So we were in a room one day, we were having this big planning session and everybody was together. And I was speaking and it was my strategy, my plan. So we're walking through. And at one point in time, somebody stopped me and they said, "I see a concerning eye roll from Barry." I thought, No, so stop what we're doing, look to Barry, because he didn't say anything. He didn't interrupt me. He didn't disagree with me. He just rolled his eyes, which meant everybody, because we respect Barry, we know that when he rolls his eyes, it means something, right? Hope he doesn't hate me when he sees this recording. So we stopped and we asked, what's going on? And he explained, and it changed the direction of the conversation. But somebody had to call out, hey, there's something going on. If they had just ignored it, we wouldn't have gotten it. Right? So sorry, Barry. Oh, sorry. Energy and enthusiasm. Everybody wants to have it in their leaders. Not all leaders have it. It's difficult. I'm going to skip that for just a second because it kind of goes into this. We can't all be charismatic born leaders. So Ashley and I were talking about it beforehand. I am classified as an introverted, a social introvert. Right? I'm social. I like people, but I'm also good being by myself and hanging out. And if I tend to avoid large crowds when given the opportunity. So we're not necessarily all going to be the Dara Khosrowshahis and the Barack Obamas where you just have this charisma. Not everybody has it. I hate the second one. In leadership courses, especially for women, they tell us that we need to lower our voices if we want to be more influential. So we tend to have higher voices, and if we lower them, then people will listen to us more. I'm like, well, can't people just get used to the fact that women have high voices? It drives me crazy. Yeah, exactly. So I've seen it, and I've even listened to it in several leadership courses where they advise it, but no, my voice is high, especially when I get emotional, and that's just the way it is. We don't all need to lean in. Sorry, these two are a little gender-based, but we don't all need to. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. Right? I'm perfectly happy where I am. I love my job. I don't need to be the CEO. I wouldn't mind the paycheck of the CEO if I could just stay where I am. So. It shouldn't feel like manipulation, right? Back to Dale Carnegie's book where it did feel like that. If you're out of your comfort zone and it feels like you're manipulating somebody, then stop and find another tactic. So this one I like. It's influencing styles. So finding your influencing style. So there's different ways to go about it. There's rational, right? So rationalizing, it's using logic, using reason. It's great. Asserting, sounding like you know what you're talking about, being confident, and people will follow. Right? It works for a lot of people. Negotiating, finding a way to compromise and work together. Inspiring, getting people on board, getting people to buy in, getting them to see the new possibilities. Bridging, uniting and connecting others, listening and building. If you're thinking about long-term sticking with it, so people might, rationalizing is what I do, right? I've got a logical argument. If I convince you and I show you the facts, you'll agree. That's my comfort zone. But inspiring is really the one, if you want people to stick with you and keep following you the longest, studies show that inspiring is the way to go. But how do you do it? It's not easy, right? Especially when they don't agree with what you're saying and they want to be product managers themselves, right? There's a ... at the bottom. Does anybody have any additional ones as far as influencing styles? I'm sorry? One big one that comes to mind, what do we get in the office at Christmas time from all of our vendors? Right? Gifts. Well, yes, bribery is a good influence. Okay, maybe not bribery, maybe gratification or what is, yeah. Donuts, pizza, gift baskets, game tickets to the Mariners game. That's influence. Any others? Bartering, yeah. You give me this. Oh, that's a very good one. Very common one. Trading, trade-offs.
I'm not sure about the right word, but sometimes you can have off-table conversations before.
Yes. So kind of set it like backroom negotiations, right? So yeah, and you really have to find the style that works for you, and it's going to be different in different circumstances. So my go-to is rationalization, because I'm a data person, and that's easier for me. But it's also not as effective in the long term, right? They did it because the numbers said that they should. They did it because I put forth a logical argument. I can be a bit of a bully in meetings if I want to, right? They might have done it and believed the numbers because I said that it was a good idea, not because they were really bought off on it. So how do you increase influence? All right. Number one, I think, is self-awareness. These are my thoughts. It might not be, you're not going to find a textbook out there, but self-aware, know your strengths and weaknesses, know which influence styles work for you, know what you can do, how charismatic are you. If you're really charismatic, use it. If you're not, find a different strategy, right? So there's a lot of ways to figure out self-awareness, right? So you can ask for 360-degree feedback. You can ask your peers, where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses. You can start paying attention. You can do some of the, there's leadership, so not leadership, there's like personality surveys. What is it, Myers-Briggs you can do. There's the one that we did that told me that I'm not very optimistic. There's all kinds of things that you can do, but try to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are. Have a conversation with your management, with your team, take some people out to lunch and bribe them with donuts. Try to get a feel for what you're good and what you're bad at, and what you're influential in and what you're not. Be competent. If you go to a meeting unprepared, if you don't know why you're asking your delivery team to do this product, it's not going to fly. You're not going to be influential. People aren't going to listen. So know what you're doing. Be prepared. Go to the meetings with your information at hand. Or be honest and tell them, I don't know. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. This is also one that's come up a lot in our leadership course, is just being able to say, I don't know, or being able to say when you're uncomfortable or what you do know and what you don't. People want to see vulnerability in each other, right? It makes us connect more. I was telling Brian earlier, I'm supposed to be learning how to present, and so I'm supposed to be practicing my arc and park. So I'm supposed to be walking like this and then parking, right? And I'm supposed to be not having dinosaur hands. I'm not supposed to be talking like this. I'm supposed to be out, because we're practicing our presentation skills at work, right? You notice I didn't do any of that. So let me show you my vulnerability. This is my weakness. I did not do any of the things that I'm supposed to be doing. But those are the things that make us human and that make us relate to each other, and that also make people believe they can trust you and follow you, right? So, and it also helps with dinosaur hands. But it's weird. If you open up like this, it feels very grandiose, and most of us aren't comfortable being that grandiose. So anyway, okay. I've also found I fidget. So. Yeah, it happens. Okay, assume positive intent. I'm really bad at this one. I go into a room, and when people don't agree with me, it's because they're trying to undermine what I'm doing. Right? It's silly, but when you have discussions and somebody didn't talk to you about it before you get into the room and you're blindsided, they were hiding it from me. Right? It's not that they ran out of time and didn't have time to talk to me about it. It's that you have to be, I have to work on this one myself all the time. Assume positive intent. Assume that the people that are in the room are there with you, working together to solve a problem. Right? If you do, you get more buy-in from them, they get more buy-in from you. It's a much better situation, but it's hard. Right? It shouldn't be, but it is. Treat others well, solicit their opinions and expertise. People want their opinions to matter. Back to our conversation from earlier as far as the tech team buying in, you want to be able to say, hey, what do you think? What do you think we should do? Especially for me, my tech team is in this every single day, all day long. They have ideas, they have thoughts. And if somebody's disagreeing with you, or they're agreeing with you, or you're building out a future, they should be talking to you and sharing what they're thinking. But if you don't ask, and I have a tendency to do this, I stay in my little bubble. I don't go out to my peers and say, hey, what do you think I should do? I forget to talk to senior management. I tend to get really busy with day-to-day and forget about the world out there. And then all of a sudden one day the world is going by and I haven't been noticing. So get out there, especially as product. Your whole job is figuring out what you should be building, right? Embrace difficult conversation. We're in the Pacific Northwest. It's really common for passive aggressiveness, right? So I don't know why, but it is. Try to avoid it. When you see a problem, just embrace it head on, right? The Barry eye rolling thing, sorry again, Barry. Call it out, right? Don't let those things just go. The elephant in the room it's perfectly okay to talk about the elephant in the room, and people will appreciate it. It'll be awkward, it'll be uncomfortable, but do it. Right? Tell stories. So I hope you liked my Mahdi story on the camel, right? So try to pull them in. I'm not great with PowerPoint presentations, so I figured the camel would be good. Be emotionally curious, and this is where Dale Carnegie's book come in to play, is trying to be actually genuinely want to know about other people. Don't do it just because you want something from them. Genuinely be interested in other people and what they're doing. So it's a hard one too for people like me who are more introverted, right? And it feels fake sometimes. Hi, how you doing? What's going on? You know. But we did feedback review today, or feedback, and the first thing you start off with is, you know, welcoming somebody to the one-on-one, and then how are you? And it's like, well, if you have something bad to talk about, starting off with how are you just feels weird. But anyway. Okay, and that's all that's a little early, I hope. Okay, all right. Any other questions then? Influence, everybody ready? Does anybody know their influence style? And yeah? What's your influence style? I'm sorry?
The one that's most impactful.
Inspiring. Cool, that's good. So you'll be very effective. Yeah. Mr. Ham?
What they react to does with their personality type.
Very true.
Who want personalization. There's some who are like, connect with me, tell me the story, tell me about, I mean, it's very different.
That's a very good point. Yeah, your audience, different people want different things. It's the same, one of the things I just spent my whole day in leadership training today, so you're going to hear about it a bit. So last 3 days actually. So, but it's also, and when you're doing one-on-ones and employee feedback, right? It's your coaching has to change based on who you're coaching and the style that they want to be coached in, not the style that you want to coach. Same thing for influence. If these people are influenced in different ways, different styles make sense. But yeah. More? Oh. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No.
A big part of, like, in larger companies that I've seen, product management is gathering the requirements from your stakeholders, your roadmap. So could you speak a little bit about, like, how you go about gathering requirements? And I've seen the vague, like, here's our 10,000 and above level roadmap of like 4 things on an arrow versus like too detailed. So
yeah,
could you speak about some maybe process around some of that?
Sure. And I can speak from my team's experience and kind of the processes that we go through, which isn't the same across every company, of course. But so when we're trying to figure out, so we do what we call 120 planning. So it's basically we do 3 or 4 months of planning at a time. So it's called 120 because it's supposed to be 120 days, but sometimes it's 6 months and sometimes it's 3 months. It's just we don't change the title. But we do basically planning in 3 or 4 month increments where we do big planning. So we've just gone through a session where we planned out the next year and a half at a very high level, right? These are the things that we want to focus on, not necessarily a strategy, because there's not the how are we going to get there, it's the what we're trying to focus on. We get more into the how as we get into smaller time periods. So here's directionally where we want to go and what we think we're going to do for the next year and a half, 2 years. Now let's break it down into 3 or 4 month cycles, and what are we doing now? We don't waste time breaking down next year because GDPR 0.2 is coming along and all the other things that we don't know. So directionally we focus on the strategy, but not with the how. A fuzzy idea of how, but not concrete. But again, my product's a little different. And then we do 3 or 4 months planning, and those are the big buckets. These are the things we're going to be focusing on within the next 3 or 4 months. And then when it comes down to we agree, we actually do something. It's a thing that I haven't seen before, but at Agency and Expedia, most of the teams do pitches, where we basically go out to the company and say, come ask us to build something. So you can submit a pitch, and you can submit a pitch. Anybody can say, I have an idea and I'd like product to build it. And so you bring it to me as the product manager. I get my tech team to talk it over. Is it even feasible? Is there any way in hell we could possibly do this? And if so, then we'll pitch it. And we have on our 120-day session, the people that are pitching these ideas come in and speak to them. And then we have a big vote. And the voting at the end is based on all the pitches that were presented. It doesn't mean that the product manager has to do that. I'm the product manager. I get to decide whether I take those pitches or not. But the pitches help me decide. It helps me shape my product and see what the rest of the company thinks I should do. So it's a great exercise. Now we're going through a time period right now where there's so many things that I have to do. My defense is so high that I can't take pitches. So probably the next 6 months, that's how it's going to be. So I'm in defense only mode. As soon as I get into offense, that's great. But right now I'm not there. So we do that, and then, sorry, just 2 seconds. So within that, and then we start breaking that down into stories and backlog and prioritizing. So we come out of that planning session, we say, this is what we're focusing on for the next 4 months. And if nothing changes, that's what we do. But something always changes.
And your sprints are 2 weeks, and if, whatever breaks or something didn't work or something doesn't integrate, then you...
Right. And I've started something now for the team where every 2 weeks, because I have three Agile teams, about to have 4 Agile teams within my product. And so I've started every 2 weeks, I kind of send out a summary of how are we doing on this 4 months and progressing toward our goals for the 4 months. So it just kind of depends. And I just started doing that in this 120 to kind of help us get an idea of, are we going to make the things that we wanted to do? Did something change? And my story right now is everything changed, sorry. But it's a good, I mean, it's people know. And sorry, I had one question back in the back, and I'll come back. Yeah.
So there are there are pitches, and a pitch had to include say 5 different teams. Let's say 3 or 4 product managers agreed at 1 or 2 places, and we can't do it.
Right.
Then what really let's say 4 agreed, but 1 is
Yes, and it's a very good question. So we, especially in my space, because again, I have so many dependencies upon my upstream teams. So before the 120s, the product managers that have overlap need to get together and talk about the big things that they want to do. Then we have the 120s, we get the pitches, we vote. Then we go back for 2 weeks pretty much after the 120 and have conversations with other product managers to see, okay, can we even take this pitch? Yeah, it got voted, but can we do it? Can we coordinate across? So it's a lot of product and tech leadership talking to each other. So that influence, that coordination, it's all there. Right. So, and then we come back and say, yes, we can take this pitch, and even though we got the most votes, we can't do it, or yes, we can do it. So, sorry, I had one, yeah.
And when you mentioned you have your 4 Agile teams, and do you have other product support within there that's helping run the day-to-day of those? Or, yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. So, sorry, not all mine. I'm in a unique position. I have a product manager in India who just started a couple of months ago, and so we have a team in India. We have a product manager in Paris who just started Monday. Yay! I'm very excited, and her team is split across this odd mix of Norway, Denmark, Europe, and a few people in India. And then we have 2 teams here in Bellevue. And so I have product managers, not quite, but getting there across those teams. But then they roll up to the global data platform, which is me from a product perspective. So yeah, I don't do it all by myself.
So when you're looking at your going back to the roadmap, when you're looking at your roadmap from the 1.5 to 2 years, is that for all of the product managers that are working with you?
Yes.
And then each of those kind of has their individual roadmaps
Right.
as well that rolls out.
Exactly. We're getting everybody together the first week of October. They're flying over so we can do some planning together. Plus, they're brand new, so it'll be an opportunity for us to actually meet in person for the first time. So my team's a bit unique because I do the late night meetings with the India team. I do early morning meetings with the Paris and Norway and Denmark folks. It's being global changes your world. I was really thrilled. So a little bit of so the next product school presentation I think is about the impact of global on product. So that'll be a really good one. So one more question, and then we'll, if we're okay? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my question's about stakeholders and onboarding. Do you guys do anything into formal office hours or anything like that for, say, someone that hadn't previously been very fully integrated with that data platform, but they have something that might be, UI, UX facing sort of thing, similar to what you showed us previously, and they need to be able to integrate. Do you have a conversation where it's, we're going to prioritize it ourselves, take care of it ourselves? Do you allow wait teams? How do you reconcile?
So it all depends, right? It's very much, there's only so much that as fast as I can move, even though we have 3 teams now, which is more. A year ago I had 1 team. So yay, this is awesome. But we also have all of this defense. So we've got GDPR, we have changes to our source systems, we have a huge amount of stuff. So we're having the conversations with them, but can I actually prioritize doing anything about it? It depends. So that whole, where do you put your energy? It's a daily balance.
And in that case, would you put it in a backlog that's not, like a full-on user story one, but more of an overall feature set thing?
Yeah, I have a Trello board. We have all kinds of tools, right? So I have a Trello board where I keep my ideas, the things that I could build if I had time. And then I have Jira where I keep the things that I'm going to build for sure, or that the team is going to build for sure. And then we have our high level 120 planning. So we do a mixture of tools, but Trello is kind of my ideas thing. And I love Trello, not a plug for the product, but you can send an email to Trello and put it in the backlog of things to talk about to remind yourself, so that when you go into Trello, it's sitting there waiting for you. So when somebody sends me an email, I can just say forward to Trello. And it's just a nice way of thinking about them not forgetting. But, and it also allows, I open up the Trello board to the product managers that are my stakeholders. So I have a next in line column, and it's basically, if you want something from me at some point in the future, put it there so that I know that it's important to you. Because sometimes we have hallway conversations and they'll say, hey, I need this. And then you prioritize it. And they're like, what? I didn't ask for that, did I? Oh yeah, I asked for that. It's like, well, I want to prioritize the things that you actually care about, and it helps them say, this is really the most important thing. So, because hallway conversations turn into a lot of extra work if you're not careful. Okay, awesome. So back over to Brian.
All right, how about another round of applause for Whitney?